Welcome to today's webinar, Best Practices for Data Center Migration Planning. Our presenter today is Lex Cressett. Lex is an enterprise solution architect working with large AWS customers in the Pacific Northwest. Prior to joining AWS, Lex successfully led several large-scale data center migrations to AWS. Today with us, we also have Michael Rizzoli, Drew Meyer, and Jayanth Murthy. They will serve as our webinar moderators and will be engaging with you and answering your questions throughout the presentation while Lex presents. Lex, welcome. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Ryan, and thanks for joining us today. So this is primarily a business presentation, has some technical overtones, but it won't have any cool demos. We'll try to take a relatively dry topic, data center migration, and bring it to life and hopefully pass along some helpful guidance as you consider this type of project. There'll be a few polls, as Ryan mentioned, launched by my colleagues where we can share results later. Please feel free to participate. You can post questions to our moderators as we go, and we'll do our best to leave some time at the end for Q&A. So deciding to exit a data center is a relatively easy decision, and there are many ways to get the job done. While the technical challenges are many, your early decisions will drive how quickly and well your business will likely benefit from the agility, cost savings, ease of deployment, and other benefits of the migration of your data center contents to AWS. Above all, it's important to remember that migrating a data center is an investment, which in most organizations requires some sort of rational decision framework based on expectations of an investment return. Since a successful migration comes with freedom from many constraints and the relief involved is palpable, it's important to keep a clear head and not be too emotional and think clearly about migration ROI. AWS has tools to make the process easier, but picking the right approach will drive a much higher ROI and have long-term benefits as well. Extra credit to any audience member who identifies the song that goes with the modified lyrics. So we're going to provide an overview of planning, strategy, and tactics for data center migration in the presentation and identify some of the more common pitfalls for this type of project. We'll take a quick look at the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework and discuss typical decision frameworks for migration recommended by AWS. Next, we'll look at a list of tools that AWS tools that will make inventory and detailed planning easier and their output. And then we'll dive into the risks to be avoided and the common tactical and financial enemy of all data center migrations, and that is overlapping cost. Finally, we'll review a few recommendations on planning and executing your way around these risks to make sure you minimize risk and maximize ROI. So you can see a diagram here, which is our Cloud Adoption Framework. And the AWS Professional Services team and our AWS partner network of consulting partners use this framework to help develop a strategy for cloud adoption on behalf of customers that typically begins with a business case on the left and continues through the development of a comprehensive plan for cloud adoption and migration. There is a really significant group of partners here who have a cloud migration competency and can help you plan at all levels for a data center migration. When you're new to data center migration, which most folks are, it's a great idea to get consulting help to avoid common mistakes along the way and to help set up the project management, governance, training, and security elements of your migration plan, among others. And the reason for this is that the cost of avoiding a major mistake or several months of rework with a large team will far outweigh the consulting expense involved. Even with a clear strategy, cloud adoption really isn't a binary decision, and defining tactics can really sometimes be harder than arriving at a clear strategy, honestly. It's generally not an all or nothing decision with respect to moving to the cloud. However, when it comes to vacating a data center, management will likely expect eventual budget improvement from the change, not net new operating expenses when the project's done and a small amount of equipment is left in the corner along with a pile of dust bunnies. And if you look at the typical journey to AWS, it is a well-trodden path. It starts and moves in a couple of different phases. Phase one is a typical organization moving along to adopt. is to move development and test work and build altogether new applications on AWS. We recommend this frequently as a way to get started, build success and experience, and then typically the second phase is moving digital analytics and mobile applications into AWS. The third phase is often data center migration and then moving mission-critical production apps before going all in. So with every customer, these steps might not happen in the same order, but it is a well-trodden path to move an entire organization's IT infrastructure to AWS in a phased way. And most enterprises will pick an all-in destination or pick a hybrid stopping point, and we understand that this is the case. So AWS and its partners will typically work through customers to progress through the progress of adoption over time, and the value of cloud adoption goes up over time as well. These projects that we recommend starting with in terms of development and test and mobile typically are simple to accomplish, build confidence, and so forth. But once a data center migration begins, direct connect becomes mandatory along with key decisions on security, governance, networking, and so forth, and the velocity of the migration can then increase quickly. So we'll talk a little bit later about the potential hybrid trap, however, in that if the decision is made to move not all expensive services, in particular storage and databases, and leaving these contracts in place, you can get to the point where you're partly migrated and still have a large expense burn rate. So we'll talk more about that in just a moment. So first, we'll stop for a poll.
You should see the poll question appear on your screen. Please select the radio button next to the answer you would like to submit. Thank you.
All right, we'll continue then. Thank you. So management of most enterprises won't simply make the decision to migrate a data center with some rational expectations around business benefits, and will assume that the team tasked to do the migration will use an ROI-driven approach to decision making. This is not always the case. It's frequently the case that a customer will move a significant workloads or most of a data center to AWS, and then a year or a year and a half later, the finance team raises their hand and can't understand why overall expenditures have gone up and will begin asking questions. It's good to help yourself avoid these questions by picking the right migration tactics. Typical data center cost structure starts with the cost of a secure facility and related power and cooling expenses. And these contracts typically have a long life, 3 or more years in many cases. Database and storage array maintenance and support costs normally come in second or third, depending on the choice of vendor. After that, there's a steep drop-off in level of spend for the cost of server maintenance, networking, etc. This ignores, of course, the cost of labor to supervise and operate the data center location itself. Typically, the longest lease or service contract with the shortest term expiration date drives the priority of migration. Look at the highest value contracts with the shortest expiration dates and see if you can tackle them first as a way to decide on tactics. To get started, it makes the most sense to inventory applications and create multiple lists based on the readiness of the specific application or system to be moved. So if you look at tactics around application migration, there are a bunch of models floating around. Gartner has a 5R application modernization rubric, 5 key ways to carry out the task. We add a couple, so I'll just go through these briefly. With retiring an app, it's essential to phase out applications that are just not worth moving. Basically, their maintenance costs are too high and they need to be left behind. Retain is a tougher one, sometimes leaving the transaction system as it is and then implementing new capabilities outside retained solutions, say a mainframe in particular. Replace, which is pretty obvious here, and it's possible that you would find replacing an application with a commercially available one makes sense, especially as a SaaS application, or rehost and moving to a more cost-effective platform, rehost in the first step in a cascade, and then rewrite. If the system really isn't working and meeting your needs, you can recreate the application based on a modern platform. AWS splits the last two into replatform and refactor. So with replatform, you might lift and shift an application with minor modifications. A typical one of these is to take an application, add a load balancer, auto-scaling capability, and a master and slave database with our RDS database system, and suddenly get multi-AZ, multi-availability zone benefits in terms of redundancy and scalability and availability. Refactor in particular means making a decision to take an application apart and put it together, back together again with cloud-native capabilities, things like Lambda, DynamoDB, and RDS, and so forth. So if you take these 6 R's in the AWS view and put them into a process diagram, you end up with something that looks like this, where in fact the project planning step or evaluation of application step is not at all linear, because the cost of all of those R's is not the same, and the time taken to do each one of them is not the same. So you can use AWS or third-party tools to build a process that follows this flow, and basically you discover and categorize applications by the actions taken and the priority of each. It's important, though, with retain and retire, if you're going to leave something behind and simply retain it, that can drive down the ROI on a data center migration because of overlapping costs. It's important that you take the contrarian view. You might want to take the contrarian view that you should invest in actually moving, lifting, and shifting retain applications to unblock other apps along the way. So it's not as simple to say, well, that's old, we're not moving it, and then end up having a foot left, a snail's foot left in the data center that can't be pulled up. So more detail here. I won't read through all of these, but I'll share them with you in the slide share as examples of each of the 6 R's and what you might do in each case. So there's a wide variability in the time and effort required to complete both large and small migrations. Every migration is unique, but the common project challenge is the overlapping cost of operation with the data centers being migrated. So you can see here we have large migrations that took very different amounts of time, whether they were manual or automated, plus manual discovery work and automated migration. And small migrations really vary quite a bit as much in terms of time and cost. Small migrations are really easy to do with lean methods, and there's still a high variability in terms of cost of the migration itself, in terms of time and effort. A couple of migration examples that are very interesting and different. There was a video that was playing, hopefully you may have seen some of that, about Condé Nast as a media company migrating 500 servers, a petabyte of storage, a whole bunch of mission critical applications, and 100 database servers in 3 months to AWS. That's really a fast migration, and it's quite possible. GE, on the other hand, is moving thousands of workloads, 300 ERP-related systems, and moving its data center footprint from 34 to 4 over the next 3 years. And Jim Fowler, who's General Electric's CIO, 40 years, and said that AWS is going to be his trusted partner to run the company for the next 140 years, which is kind of an interesting statement. GE Oil and Gas, as part of GE, has already migrated half of its core applications to AWS while achieving a 52% reduction in TCO, which is impressive. So those are just some customer migration examples. We'll stop briefly for a poll here. It looks like there's a fairly even distribution there of folks moving their data centers over time. I'll just go ahead and step through now some recommendations that are somewhat prescriptive, realizing that every migration project is different. But there certainly are some common themes, global variables. So the key differences in the approach we'll recommend here are to train the staff while doing the work with a consultancy that has a great deal of experience with migrations, and build a center of excellence along the way. And what I mean by that is an organization into which folks who are trained and knowledgeable can be moved along with their knowledge airlifted out of their day job so that the organization becomes a learning organization. It's important also to budget carefully for overlapping expenses and lay out a plan to slow down and stop capital expenditures. Remember, you won't be able to shut down hardware purchases right away, but you can slow them over time. And talk about whether the merits of dev and test and new project first approach really makes sense in the context of a data center migration. Also, it's important to try to relax and enjoy the fact that traditional project management won't work well, since all of the possible date and cost risks won't likely be known until the end of the project. Continuing types of projects, go ahead and try moving the most difficult workloads first. And those are typically storage and database workloads, and use agile methods. You can use Agile Scrum in the development team, and a method like Kanban, that's a lean method in the sysadmin group or IT group to manage workload and decrease the amount of work in process as best you can. So if you look at this illustrative example, there's a co-location provider and AWS expense listed here, but not expenses having to do with databases and storage and so forth. But just to keep those kinds of lines straight, you can see that the co-location provider is billing at close to $200K per month and provides only space, power, and physical security. During the period of overlapping cost in a 2-year large-scale migration, operating spend peaks $100K per month in Q4 of 2015. The pressure on burn rate. If you want to make this more worrisome, you can add in the burn rate lines for your database storage servers and networking costs and so forth to make it even clearer that overlapping costs are the enemy and represent a large net investment of cash along with the team's time and effort and the payments to the consultancy involved. So we mentioned a hybrid trap here. If you get to the point where you're migrating but you're stuck, you can in fact do lots of new work and dev and test and so forth and then start migrating and end up with 1 foot in the data center and 1 foot in AWS. What you want to do there is be sure that you start with the hardest services first and to basically avoid the trap here, which is largely a financial trap. By adding cloud services and driving higher and not lower costs, you want to avoid that as a trap. So how do you refine the migration tactics here? Well, the first thing to do is to attack the most expensive data center capabilities first in order of contract expiration date. And many customers also find that it's most helpful to clean up and move their worst performing stations, these being the ones that produce tickets and are out a lot and so forth, because they typically settle down quite a bit when running on a stable, homogeneous front and backplane network as in AWS. There's a great deal to be said for pain relief. An endless cycle of reboots, repairs, and knock tickets costs money, even though this spend might be hidden. Since most IT organizations spend 80% or more of their budget or more just keeping the lights on, cost reduction in this area can create breathing room for migration. Another approach to think about is to minimize the maximum regret caused by a failure to complete the project in time. So pick the most expensive contract renewal and avoid that maximum regret. And we already talked about moving storage and databases because they have gravity and will attract applications. Finally, make sure you work with your finance team so that they can budget for declining CapEx and overburden OpEx in the period of overlapping cost, and that they have an accurate endpoint with some slop predicted for the overlapping costs. So let's expand this thinking a little bit. Let's consider 5 steps, starting with iterative planning. So your first several predictions of project endpoint following this method, reviewing contracts and so forth, and iterating on project targets will be very optimistic. So be sure to leave a buffer to run out to the end of the most expensive contract. Start with the highest risk and longest lead times in the list. And be sure that if networking setup for a direct connect circuit is going to take a while, order that circuit early. And with respect to the continuing on, budgeting and risk management, go ahead and create a budget, but add in training costs up front. Don't skimp on these cost or time allocations. Leave a 10 or 20% slop in the overlapping cost estimate. Approach your consulting resources as the best way to get started, minimize mistakes, and get the team to the point of understanding and readiness to take over. Make an agile transition for both dev and sysadmin teams before starting if you can. That's not always possible, but it's certainly ideal. Hold formal training and begin using the process as soon as you can during the migration. And again, work with the finance team to be sure they understand how capital and OpEx are going to change, OpEx spend are going to change. Leadership's really important, and the concept of a servant leader in agile terms is pretty well understood. Someone who can drive the whole team approach. And it's not the case that there shouldn't be any traditional project management. It is the case that having a project manager on the data center migration is a good idea. They will be a frustrated individual during most of the process, but still necessary and helpful. Obviously, work with the partner to create the target architecture and implement the initial skeleton of the design and get networking working very well. Fourthly, use our tools or third-party tools in our marketplace, such as the application discovery service from AWS, to create a full inventory. Then what you're going to get is a master spreadsheet of applications that you can sort, and dependency drives migration order. And if you identify where storage is used and how it, look at your build a bug of work for the teams using that inventory. Also a great idea to take AWS Application Discovery Service and look for an automated migration tool that will work with its output so that you can move applications automatically some percentage of the time, hopefully a high percentage of the time, and enhance your team's velocity. And fifth, what I'd say is it's important to organize for effectiveness, and this should be the reverse of siloed operation, in that you want to pull your developers, testers, system administrators together, and you want to split them up into thirds. It's really important, too, that the consulting partner place trained resources that are really helpful in each of these organizations, and then iterate along in an agile form, and then review the project weekly. And it's important also to roll the whole project up monthly to display progress versus plan with management. So you want to manage your velocity weekly. Your project endpoint will move, but if you're creating a learning organization and you have the team divided up into thirds with cross-functional knowledge in each of them, where you have dev and sysadmins working together, as well as QA folks, and you're doing DevOps work to the degree possible with the training that you have, you're going to get a better result than having development, QA, and system administration folks arrayed working in a traditional fashion. And this results in an application migration factory, which is, in fact, looks something like this. This is the AWS framework for doing so, where the factory itself of teams gets to be a more well-oiled machine. So once you get into that factory operation, use the tools and capabilities from AWS and partners to lower risk, be willing to change your strategy and your tactics to hit the end goal, get rid of the high-cost items and plan for recycling, move the gear out after a fallback period, and remember that it's important to get help with this. It's not a trivial task. The migration team will have to power down and unplug any system that needs to be recycled, and this takes a real allocation of time. In a 12-month migration, at least 2 months will be needed to power down and safely remove gear for recycling. And don't fret over the fact that your project endpoint will continue to keep moving. So AWS services can make this easier. As we mentioned, we have a partner network, which you should decide to work with. Selecting an APN partner with migration experience is a key decision and worth spending the time to get right. You can use our Snowball service to move 80 terabytes per device, and it's hard to beat the bandwidth of FedEx truck if you have to move petabytes. Our database migration service is a real pain reliever. You can hook up an on-premise database source and a fully managed cloud target and then keep them in sync until it's time to cut over. Then do the cutover painlessly and with low stress. While you're at it, think about moving to a cloud-native database system like Aurora from a source system that's not cloud-native. Finally, the application discovery service we mentioned is now released and can be used to build a comprehensive inventory of applications and dependencies. Since your data has the most gravitational force associated with it, and because it's one of the stickiest parts of any data center infrastructure, AWS has the tools to move large amounts of data quickly. So we talked about getting a direct connect going, and this may be as simple as cross connect in a high-end data center or require lots of paperwork. Storage arrays and tape drives are large, ugly, and expensive. The high-end tape drives fail every 2 years, and maintenance is mandatory. So get rid of them first if you can. One of the 3 storage gateway configurations is the virtual tape library offering. Unplug and set yourself free. If you have streaming data from the outside devices or a network, don't store it and move it, stream it. Think about Kinesis Firehose and stream data into Amazon S3, Redshift, or Elasticsearch. S3 is like Chicago O'Hare. All the flights land there first on the way across the country. You can also use the AWS Edge network to transfer data to S3 faster using S3 transfer acceleration, and some of our customers have seen dramatic results here where Snowball doesn't make more sense. So we've recently added the application discovery service, and it's available to you to use without a partner at the moment. Few organizations have good documentation on their applications and dependencies, and the older a given application gets, as it's deployed in a data center, the more often it's surrounded by heterogeneous components, operating system versions, etc. Hot wiring is the enemy of smooth migration. AWS ADS can help here. So the service automatically discovers the inventory of applications, determines how the applications are dependent on each other, measures applications and processes running on hosts to determine a performance baseline, and secures application discovery data with end-to-end encryption. There's also an API available for this so that you can actually interact with it by API versus at the console. The database migration service we mentioned can perform like-for-like migrations, but it also has a collection of smart tools for schema conversion. You can look at your schema and data transformation, you can look at database functions inside your databases, and you can migrate databases between engines. And it provides guidance on usually about 70% automation of taking that data transformation and applying it to a database of a different type. So some key planning takeaways here just to summarize, and thanks for your attention today. And then we'll open it up for questions. So use of lean methods really makes a lot of sense for managing and prioritizing migration work, but be sure to train the team along the way. Prioritizing the workloads to do the difficult work first will maximize ROI. Use a pro services partner or partner team to help you avoid mistakes and get project velocity up, but don't have them do all of the work. Make sure that they are there to do 3/4 of the work and that the team that takes over for them is qualified and trained. Avoid the hybrid trap by migrating and shutting down high burn rate items. We talked about that. And moving storage and databases is hard, but minimizes project risk overall. Plan to do this first. And remember that while there's lots of technology available here, overlapping costs are the common project enemy, not technology. So the best thing to do here is to talk, and this is not a sales pitch, this is actually a good idea. Talk to your AWS account team because we have many programs to help make it easier to migrate large workloads. to test large workloads, to test things like the database management system and moving large amounts of data to the cloud. So use their help and advice to become aware of these programs and get help in the migration, get help for that matter selecting a partner. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and really appreciate you listening today.